Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome back to today's reading of Hussein's revolution. We're getting to the juicy part. So let's look at Imam Hassan's crucial role in the events that will follow. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The situation was exacerbated after the assassination of Imam Ali alayhi salam, when the nation pledged allegiance to his son Imam Hassan alayhi salam. When Imam Hassan called them to rise to fend off the aggressions of Muawiyah, men were again very slow to respond. And despite the fact that Imam Hassan was able to prepare a large army to fight Muawiyah, that army was destined for defeat due to the many factions dividing it from the inside. People of many colors were joined with him. There were the Shia who followed him and his father. Some were Kharijites who wanted to fight Muawiyah at all costs. Some were mischievous men who cared only for war booty. And some were doubters. Some were tribal zealots who simply followed their chieftains. These tribal leaders were bought by Muawiyah, who had written to many of them and given them incentives to betray Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Many of Imam Hassan's followers could not resist Muawiyah's calling, and some even wrote to Muawiyah promising that they will deliver Imam Hassan to him dead or alive. When Imam Hassan went out to give a sermon and test his army's loyalty and resolve, mutiny arose. Shouts came from one corner calling for a truce. Another group mounted an assassination attempt. A man leapt from the crowd and stabbed Imam Hassan in the thigh with a dagger. The man screamed, "Humiliator of the believers! Do you wish to become an apostate as your father did before?" Imam Hassan was taken to Madain, near modern-day Baghdad in Iraq, where he spent 40 days nursing his wound. Imam Hassan alayhi salam saw, in light of these unfortunate circumstances, that the nation was not ready to fight and claim victory. It was unprepared socially and psychologically. In such circumstances, war would mean only death for his most loyal supporters and a grand victory for Muawiyah. Lanatullah alayh. I'm trying to say it. At that point, Imam Hassan settled for peace. He negotiated a treaty with Muawiyah that set a number of key conditions on Umayyad rule. The treaty expressly obliged Muawiyah to not assign an heir to his position, and that Imam Hassan will be given political power after Muawiyah's death. The treaty also obliged Muawiyah to provide for the safety and security of everyone within the empire without discrimination. The treaty had 5 provisions. Number 1, that Muawiyah would take political power on the condition that he would act in accordance with the Holy Quran, the tradition of the Prophet, the Sunnah, and the model of the righteous caliphs. Number 2, that Muawiyah will not assign an heir to his position, and that after Muawiyah's death, political power will be transferred to Imam Hassan or to his brother Imam Hussain in the case that Imam Hassan predeceased Muawiyah. Number 3, that Imam Hassan would not be obliged to call Muawiyah commander of the faithful, and that Muawiyah would undo the systematic cursing of Imam Ali throughout the empire. Number 4, peace and security will be allotted to everyone within the empire, whether Arab or non-Arab, and especially to the Shia of Imam Ali and their families. And number 5, that the treasury of Kufa is left there and not taken to Damascus, and that an allowance is provided for the orphans of those who died in battle on the side of Imam Ali in the battles of the Camel and Siffin. In this dire and miserable circumstance, that was the only path that Imam Hassan could have taken to ensure that the message he carried would not die with him. If we were to let ourselves be carried by emotions, we would think that Imam Hassan should have fought Muawiyah rather than suing for peace. Some may think this move by Imam Hassan was a shameful surrender that allowed Muawiyah to reconcile power with great ease. This feeling was evident even in the most loyal of Imam Hassan's supporters, so much so that some began to call him the humiliator of the believers. Oh, remember the assassination attempt? Someone jumped up from the crowd when Imam Hassan alayhi salam was delivering a sermon and attempted to take his life and ended up stabbing him in the thigh. He said, "Humiliator of the believers, do you wish to become an apostate as your father did before?" Those were the words uttered during the assassination attempt, mounted by those whose deep hatred for Muawiyah clouded their judgment. They could not bear the thought of a truce. So Nobly, Imam Hassan alayhi salam made a truce, made a peace treaty with Muawiyah for peace in the land. He didn't want to go to battle because he knew he would lose. He didn't have enough supporters. Meanwhile, Muawiyah had way too many supporters, but most of them he paid for. So he made a peace treaty, but so that assassination attempt on his life was made by someone who also hates Muawiyah. No wonder they said it was complex. We must view the situation with a different lens if we are to understand the position of Imam Hassan, a position that may seem ill-advised at first sight. Imam Hassan was not an adventurer, neither was he after political power. He was not a tribal chieftain. Imam Hassan alayhi salam carried a message, and he had to act accordingly. He had to take a position that would best serve the interest of the message. This was in fact the position he took, even if it was a painful decision to make. Any leader faced with the same circumstances would have made one of three decisions. Number 1, go to war at the urging of the hawks in the camp and despite the great chances of defeat. Number 2, surrender to Muawiyah, abandon the message, and suffice himself with personal gain. Or number 3, submit to the realities surrounding him and avoid military confrontation for the time being, not to become a bystander, but to pursue other avenues in influencing the nation. Imam Hassan could not have taken the first option. He was a principled man with a message to protect. If he were to fight in the circumstances that we described and with an army that's fragmented and lethargic, the only result would have been his death and the annihilation of his most loyal allies. In other words, no more Shia. No more Shia. That would have been it. The aftermath of the battle may have created great esteem and respect for Imam Hassan in the conscience of the Muslim nation, but that would have been a tragedy for the message. Its most loyal protectors would have perished. The only thing that Islam would have gained was more names to be adding to its long list of martyrs. Neither could Imam Hassan take the second option and abandon his message. Though this route would have afforded him great wealth and peace of mind, he could not, in good conscience, abandon his role as a religious leader and live a carefree and aristocratic lifestyle. The only viable option was the third, sue for peace and begin preparing the nation for the coming revolution.